This is Becky Hammond-Stetter. Today is November 19th, 2002. I'm with Sam Wilcoxon. Would you please tell me your full name?
Samuel McCaslin Wilcoxon.
Which branch of service did you serve in?
United States Air Force, the Indiana Army National Guard, and the United States Air Force Reserve at Grissom Air Force Base, Indiana.
What war and years did you serve in?
I served in the Vietnam War from 1965 through 1971.
What was your highest rank when you got discharged?
I was an E6.
Where did you serve?
I served at Ubon, Thailand for 3 years, and I served 1 year in Cam Ranh Bay, Vietnam.
Were you drafted or did you enlist?
I enlisted.
Where were you living at that time?
Indianapolis, New Whiteland, Indiana, actually.
Why did you join?
I felt obligated.
Why did you choose the service branch you did?
Well, my father was in the Army Air Corps, and he suggested I join the Air Force.
Do you recall your first days in service?
Sure do.
What did that feel like?
Well, you felt like you were being mistreated and felt kind of like a dog.
Tell me about your boot camp experience.
Well, I was like everyone else, scared to death. And the training, physical exercise, you was pushed to your limits.
Do you remember your toughest instructor?
I remember my drill sergeant, but I don't remember his name. However, when I went to Vietnam, I sat next to him on the plane, which was quite an experience, and he was a totally different person.
Which war did you serve in?
Vietnam.
Where exactly were you at?
The first time I went to Ubon, Thailand.
Do you remember the day you arrived there?
Yes, I do. When I left K.I. Sawyer Air Force Base, which was about 30 below zero, came to Indiana, spent 30 days, got on a plane, landed in Bangkok, Thailand, and it was about 105 degrees. Humidity was 110%, and I thought I was going to die.
What was your job?
That 4 years I was in as a supply sergeant. I worked in Norris Control, which was ordering aircraft parts.
Did you see combat?
Not there. Not that time. However, later on in my other tour, I did see combat there.
Were there many casualties in that unit?
We lost several pilots.
Tell me about a couple of your most memorable experiences.
Well, we were told that we couldn't tell anybody where we were at, but Mother sent me a copy of the newspaper stating that we were refueling airplanes, which is not what we were doing at all. And I remember the Thai Air Force had the little T-28 trainer-type planes, which they were using as combat aircraft. And they took all the markings off of them. They had no markings whatsoever, and they were flying into Laos and Cambodia. And it was always scary when they'd load their bombs that wasn't nothing like we would. They'd pull up there with a semi and kick them off the back end of the semi, and they'd land on the runway, and then they'd load them on the airplane. So it was pretty scary.
Did you know any prisoners of war?
No, ma'am.
Were you awarded any medals?
I was awarded several. I've got a list of them there, but several.
How did you get some of those?
Mainly by supporting the aircraft, which was our primary job.
Were you able to stay in touch with your family?
Through letters. We wasn't allowed to call home.
How long did it take letters from home to get to you?
Probably about 2 weeks usually.
What was your food like?
Well, our food was pretty good because we got to eat in the mess hall. So it was real good, I thought.
Did you have plenty of supplies?
We were short on supplies. When I first got there, we stayed in tents. Then they built these temporary barracks, I guess you'd call them, which was more or less pole barns. And it took a long time to get mattresses, blankets, that type of things. But we were fortunate.
Did you have a lot of mosquitoes and malaria?
A lot of mosquitoes. I slept under 2 mosquito nets because I'm allergic to insects. So we tie that together with the heat, and of course nothing was air conditioning, and it was hot.
So you had a lot of stress.
A lot of stress. We worked 12, 16 hours a day.
How did you men entertain yourselves?
Well, this is unique. I was in the first GI band in Thailand and the first GI band in Vietnam. And I played music the whole 4 years I was fighting the war, believe it or not.
Did you get to go on leave?
The first tour in Thailand, I didn't. They had R&R, rest and recreation. I take that back, I did too. It was 2 weeks in Bangkok, Thailand. Yeah, that's what I remember that.
Do you recall any humorous events or pranks you pulled on each other?
Oh, we was always pulling pranks. I can't remember particularly right offhand. But you had to pull pranks to keep going, I guess.
What did you think of the officers and fellow soldiers?
Oh, we were just like a family. We were close. Of course, you ate together, slept together, worked together, played together. We were close.
Did you lose any close friends during that tour?
Not during that tour, I didn't. Although some of the pilots we knew because of association with them. Yeah.
Do you recall the day your service ended?
Yes, I do. Both times.
Where were you?
I got sent, when I was from Thailand, got sent back to Travis Air Force Base, California. And the weather was so cool, after living such a hot climate, you about froze to death.
What did you do in the days and weeks afterward?
Well, when I got home, I more or less just took it easy for a couple of weeks.
Did you work or go back to school?
I wound up working. My father was a plumber, and I started out in the plumbing business, going through the apprenticeship. But that only lasted less than a year, and I decided to go back into the service again. So I joined the Air Force again and went back to Thailand after going to weapons mechanic school. And I remember I got operated on in California, and when I was laid up for about 3 months, laying on my stomach. And of course all of us had put in to go to Vietnam. Well, all my buddies got Vietnam, and I had Thailand again, and I was really upset, and I wrote a letter to my congressman complaining. Although it didn't do any good. But the following year, after Thailand, then I did get sent to Cam Ranh Bay, Vietnam.
Was it what you thought it would be?
Well, compared to some, it was pretty good. I wasn't out in the field like a grunt would be. We worked hard. We had several scary moments. We we went on a search and destroy mission, which I thought was kind of unusual for Air Force people, but we did. We fired some rounds and got some rounds fired at us. And my job, however, was totally different than it was in the first time in Thailand. I was loading bombs, 500-pounders and 1,000-pounders and 750s on what was called preload, which was totally new. It was more or less an experiment to see if they could get the bombs loaded on the aircraft faster. And what that consisted of is that had what was called MUR racks, which would hold 3 bombs, or TUR racks, which would hold 6 bombs. We would load those bombs on these racks. They'd pull them out to the flight line on the trailer. And then when the frag, which is, they call it the frag, which was the munition order for that mission, come out, all they'd have to do is go hook a jammer, which was a MJ4 or an MJ83, I think it was, which was a little motorized forklift. All they'd have to do is go to that trailer, pick the bombs up, slap that whole rack up on the aircraft, which was about 10 times faster than have to manually load each bomb individually. The thing that scared me or aggravated me the most was we can get all of our frag loaded for the night, because I usually work 12-hour shifts. We'd get it loaded and they'd turn around and change the frag and make us download those bombs and change it, put different bombs on, or else they'd make us download them and change the fuse settings on them. So it was always a big mess.
How many men did it take to load one plane?
Actually, you usually loaded a plane with 2 weapons mechanics. But to load the racks, it took a crew of about 6 men. They were brought in on a semi, which we even went to pick the semi up from the bomb dump, which is where they loaded the bombs onto the semi. I drive the truck up to the preload station, which was our area. Then I'd drive it's called a MH-10, I think it was, which was a crane. We'd pick the bombs up off the trailer and lay them on these rails, which was the preload rails. And then we could push those bombs up to the loading station where you had the mechanized lifting device, which is what the MUR and TUR racks were held onto. You'd lay that down by the bombs, shoot the bombs over to them, and then connect them to that rack. And then that hoist would lift that rack up and you put it on the trailer, tie it down on the trailer, and then they send it out to the flight line. Now, those bombs, when we first got them down in the bomb dump, they didn't have fins on them. We'd have to go down to the bomb dump and put the fins on them. I used to hate it because the bomb dump had PSP, which is the metal runway-like material, but heavy metal. If it's 110 degrees out and those bomb fins are metal, you had to wear gloves or you'd actually burn your hand off. And we actually fried an egg on that PSP before it gets that hot. And the bomb fins for a high drag bomb fin weighed about 110 pounds. And you're lifting that by yourself, picking that up and trying to scoot it on the back end of that bomb, and there's a spring that goes on there that has to be just right or those fins would pop open. Then you'd really have a mess trying to get the fins pulled back together, stuck back on that bomb again. But we survived it. One of the most harrowing experiences, the Viet Cong found out that we had 10,000, 15,000 pound bombs stored there. And those bombs were used a 3-foot nose fuse called a daisy cutter. And when that fuse would go off, that bomb was about 3 or 4 foot off the air from the ground. And they'd make runways that way. And it'd just obliterate everything within probably 500 feet around it, just clear it out. So the Viet Cong was real interested in blowing those bombs up. And many nights they would attack us with rockets and mortars. And I remember distinctly the very first time that happened. They always told us when we were loading weapons that we had to run down to the bomb dump and shut all the lights off, because the lights, we were working under lights like in a baseball field, huge lights everywhere. And for some reason, they thought if you shut those lights off, Charlie wouldn't know where we was at. Well, what they finally found out was Charlie already had those things set, aimed. A lot of times they'd set them off with candles. They wouldn't even be around when they go off. So it really didn't matter if we shut them lights off or not. But I can remember those rockets going off, and they kept yelling for us to get in the bunkers. And there'd be 50 caliber tracers going over our heads, and of course we had M16s, but half the time you couldn't tell where the fire was coming from. And the ironic thing was Cameron Bay was supposed to be a safe base. It was never that safe. So that was a very harrowing experience. Plus, when I was in Vietnam, I was in the 1st GI band, and we played country music. There was about 9 different bases at Cameron Bay. A lot of them, there was Army, Navy, and Air Force. And to get on the Navy side of the base was clear on the other side of the peninsula, which was about a 20-mile drive through a jungle road. And it got so bad from us getting shot at, we used to take a big van truck, and the Air Force would always send a Jeep with a 50 caliber mounted on it. And we got attacked so many times that that van looked like somebody tried to blow it up. It had holes from one end to the other. And our lead guitar player at the end got so scared, he quit. He wouldn't go back no more.
How many men were in your band?
There was 5 of us.
What did you play?
I played the drums. It was always neat going to the Navy side, because the Navy had the what they call them, I believe it was the fast boats, which ran around the bays and the outer harbors looking for the Viet Cong. And when they'd come back, these crews would come back in at night after a kill, which means they shot up some Viet Cong or destroyed something. Those guys would come back and throw a party every night. And I never wore so much champagne in my life, because they'd go to the bar and buy these huge bottles of champagne and pop those corks and just wet everybody down. It was pathetic. But it was good. And the USO tried to get our band to come play with them. But our base commander said absolutely not. They're not here to entertain, they're here to fight the war. So we wound up not getting to do that, although we were pretty disappointed. But we played music every night. And on Sundays, we'd play 2 and 3 shows, because that was our only days off. But the GIs loved us because we were their sole entertainment. Although while I was there and while I was in Thailand, I did get fortunate enough to see Bob Hope. And in Thailand, we got to, I forget what they call the name of it. We were the band that introduced his group when they came. So we got to meet all of them individually, and it was really an experience.
What was some of the favorite songs you played?
Oh, I left my heart in San Francisco. That was always a tearjerker. The poor guys, of course, you have to understand, most of the time we were playing at their clubs or outdoor clubs or theaters or whatever. There was always plenty of booze to go around, and them poor guys would be crying in their beer, you might say. I bet we played that song 1,000,000 times. That's always the most requested song.
Did you continue any of your close friendships?
Yes, it's really ironic. My last tour from Vietnam went back to Ubon, Thailand. And only a week ago, I got an email from a guy that worked for me over there in the flare shop that I haven't heard from in 32 years. Within the last 2 years, there's 6 of us that all work together that have got in touch with each other, and one of the guys even come to visit me last year. So it's really unique. It's been a close bond between all of us. And another dear friend that was in Thailand with me, he lives in Montana. He and I stay in touch. I've been out there several times. He's been here. And also in Thailand, That's where I got my first experience with the fire service. My friend over there was a firefighter for the Thai Air Force. I'll never forget the first time he took me on a ride with their new fire truck. We went through all these little villages, and I sat up on top of the hose rack, and they had an old bell back there, and I was ringing that bell every village we'd go through. But he actually came over here about 12 years ago, and this was while I was working for the Department of the Navy in the fire department, and I had the honor of taking him all over the United States to different Navy and Air Force bases, showing him the fire service, because he was the head fire chief for the Thai Air Force at that time. And it was a real memorable occasion. We really loved it. But what I was going to get to was I still email his son in Thailand daily. So that bond's just as close as ever.
That's great. Did you join a veterans organization?
Yes, I did. I joined the American Legion, and I also joined the DAV. I'm a lifetime member of the DAV. Although I've quit drinking, so I don't go to many functions.
What did you do as a career after your service?
Well, I had a restaurant for about 5 years, and I had 3 lunch trucks that we ran out of that restaurant, and we made our own sandwiches, all of our food. But my restaurant was a taco house. And in 1975, there wasn't any tacos as we know it today. In fact, before I got out of the service, I contacted Taco Bell and asked about buying a franchise. You have to remember this is in 1971, and they told me that they would never go east of the Mississippi. Of course, now the Taco Bell's in every city. So I guess I was just a little bit ahead of my time there. But I wound up joining the Army National Guard in 1975. And they said, what would you like to do in here? And I said, well, what do you got? And they said, we need some people in crash rescue. And I said, fire department? They said, yeah. I said, well, that sounds good. They said, we'll send you in school. So they sent me to several schools, and I wound up being the fire chief before it was over with. And that was for 9 years. Got lots of experience. And I actually went to work full-time after the restaurant for the Army National Guard at Camp Atterbury, where I worked in their supply room for about 2 years, until I finally got the chance to come to Crane on the fire department. But I had to work for the Army for a year. We worked in making munitions. And I finally got on the fire department, and that was probably the greatest career move I ever made. And after I got out of the Army National Guard, I joined the Air Force Reserve up at Grissom Air Force Base in the fire department. And I enjoyed that too, so I've been fire service connected with the military for a long time. And I just retired, actually I retired 3 years ago. Mandatory retirement in the Department of Defense Fire Department's 55 years old. Now since I retired, they've left it to 57. The firefighting's a young man's job. That's why they could get out.
Did your military experience influence your thinking about war or about the military in general?
Well, I think personally that everybody needs to serve their country somewhere or another. And to me, the military is probably the best way to do that. The military teaches you discipline, it teaches you respect. It also teaches you to appreciate all the wonderful freedoms that we have in this country.
Do you attend reunions with your soldiers?
I'm going to one December the 8th up at Grissom Air Force Base. We have a Christmas party there every year, and I haven't missed one yet.
How did your service and experiences affect your life?
Well, physically, I'm disabled. And that was, fortunately, I wasn't wounded, but Well, unfortunately, first of all, they did an operation on me before I went overseas to begin with, and I didn't find out till several years later that they botched that operation. That caused me lots of problems, and then in Vietnam and Thailand, all the work I did was manual, loading aircraft and loading munitions of every sort. Everything was lifting, bending over and lifting. And of course, when you're a young man, that you're all fired up and that doesn't bother you. But the older you get, you find out that it has bothered you, and it messes my back up. And in fact, I was just operated on June the 28th at the VA. They did what was called a laminectomy. And they said that if I didn't have the operation, I'd be in a wheelchair. I couldn't walk. So, but the operation seems to have went real well. And that's just one of the prices you pay. But to me, that's a small price to pay for the freedom that we have.
Is there anything you'd like to add that we haven't covered in this interview?
I believe it was 1967 in Thailand. I was there when Colonel Robin Old shot down the first MiGs of the war. And I'll never forget that. When they came back from that mission, well, the whole base just went crazy. And they did all these flyovers, these low passes and rolls, and we knew something was going on. They wouldn't just be doing that. I think they shot down 3 MiGs in that mission. That started the MiG run, as they called it. And I was also there in Thailand. We still have the AC-130 gunships, which they've used in a lot of these most recent skirmishes. And that was probably the most awesome aircraft I ever had the opportunity to, or fortunate enough to work on. We loaded flares in those. And Charlie was always trying to sneak in and put explosive charges in their wings and blow them up. But fortunately, we caught them every time. But I remember one particular time, I lived downtown off base. We heard these big explosions. I was asleep, but actually blew me out of bed, a concussion. And I knew he was getting attacked, so I ran to the gate. I had a bicycle. And they had some Army trucks there, and I told them I needed to get to the shop, which was on the flight line. They said, "You can't go on the flight line." I said, "Well, I have to, because anytime there was a threat of being attacked, they'd send these gunships up, which had awesome firepower. Plus, they launched these flares, which 10 million candle power, it's just like daylight. And they'd always want to launch those flares. On the way out to the bomb dump, there was another guard shack, and the guy tried to stop me, and I just kept going. And I finally made it. There was bullets whizzing everywhere, and explosions going off. And sure enough, when I got there, the phone was ringing, and they said we need to load the flares out on the flight line immediately. And I was the only one there. The rest of the guys, I don't know where they were. I took the flares out to that aircraft and loaded it myself. And they were shooting like crazy, and I was scared to death. But they lost the aircraft, and they wound up dropping the flares, and they caught the sappers. They killed everyone. They was overdone.
Do you know how old you were then?
I was probably about 24. Wasn't very old.
What advice would you like to give today's young service people?
Just give it your best, and remember what you're there for. And that's to protect the many freedoms this country has, and to give other countries the opportunity to have freedom.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I'm just thankful I live in the United States of America. I'm proud to be an American.
We want to thank you for sharing this with us, and we want to thank you for serving our country.
Thank you.